Hello, you're watching EG's Future of Birmingham event. I'm Tim Burke, EG's Deputy Editor. Welcome if you're just joining us. Welcome back if you have rejoined us after our earlier panel. Thanks again quickly to our series partner Savills, event partners Avison Young and Shoesmiths, as well as ACES for their support of today's virtual event. Again, please do feel free to submit questions during this panel to our guests. If you want to do that via Slido, then you can either use the box alongside the live stream, or you can go directly to the website to do that. The address is www.sli.do, so it's sli.do. And if you tag your question with the hashtag EG Future Cities, then that will make it to me. Now, in these last few weeks, the importance of communities has come to the fore, even if we're having to distance ourselves physically from others. And in this discussion, we'll ask, with some clearly challenging times still ahead, how will Birmingham meet the future needs of the next generations, and what role will real estate play in doing that? What will the city's future communities look like, and how will we ensure that sustainability is driving work across the built environment? So to help me tackle these topics, I am joined now by Becky Farr, a development planning manager covering North and West Birmingham at Birmingham City Council, Nathan Cornish, a director at Urban Splash, and Carl Potter, regional managing director for Avison Young. Thank you all for joining us at EG today. Let's set the scene. First of all, the unavoidable topic is, of course, the coronavirus pandemic that we are all living and working through. I wonder if I could ask you all just to open with a quick statement about how you've seen the Birmingham market react to the challenges of recent weeks. Becky, maybe I could ask you to go first.
It's been quite interesting. I think obviously it's an unprecedented event, and it was very difficult to have a feel as to how things would change, certainly from the City Council's point of view. We have still seen quite a number of significant applications coming in, fewer in terms of householder applications, and I expect that trend to continue, because I don't think it's something people are going to be prioritising at the moment. Perhaps people are at home thinking about what they want to do with their properties, and will have a sudden rush once life starts to return to normal. But there is still a turnover of applications. There are still pre-app discussions going on. We're still meeting with developers. Obviously, things are being done differently, and there are things that have slowed down or paused. But I think there's still a lot of activity in the Birmingham market, certainly from a planning point of view.
That sounds promising. Carl, what are you seeing from your seat with Avison Young?
I think there was a huge amount of momentum prior to the conditions we're currently going through. Mm-hmm. And the key is just to assess when this is all over and when we start back to whatever it is that we do after this crisis, what those situations are like. It's far too early to tell. There's obviously been huge impact on some of the industries that a vibrant city centre relies on, restaurants, eateries, coffee shops, etc., all closed, so they have no economy at the moment. The question really is how quickly they pick themselves back up afterwards, and what the reaction of people is to the situations they find themselves in as we begin to recover.
Yeah. Nathan, would you agree with that? What are you seeing from Urban Splash's perspective at this time?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it then, really. It's been an incredible 4 weeks, actually. 4 weeks ago, it was kind of China and Italy's problem. And just how that's accelerated in the last 2 weeks, really, has been quite phenomenal, really. I mean, we've made some very difficult decisions as a business to close our factory, which is based over in Alfreton in East Midlands, where we build houses. We've closed all of the construction sites that we're in direct control of, i.e. we're the main contractor, and there's 13 live sites across the country. So, it really has, I suppose, brought a lot of things to a grinding halt, but on a, from a physical output point of view, but it's also given us sort of time as a business to start thinking about, taking a pause, working out strategy, and we're communicating perhaps more than ever, actually, both as a board and as a development team and other parts of the business. So negative overall, but actually lots of positives as well. So sort of mixed feelings, really.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think a lot of people would agree with that. Carl, I was going to ask you to talk us through the firm's role in some of the notable regeneration that's going on across Birmingham at the moment, and maybe give us your thoughts on the responsibility that real estate has in ensuring that its places and spaces are engendering that sense of community at the moment, the S in ESG, the social factors there.
Yeah, so we talk about communities quite a lot, and we talk about the need for people to have an identity and a belonging. And despite what we have at the moment with everybody in isolation, it will remain into the future that people need people. And the more that people interact with each other and the more they have a sense of belonging, the more communities are built up and built together. As a business, we've been involved in some huge regeneration processes in Birmingham over decades. And I think, our initial involvement in Brindley Place 20 to 25 years ago really earmarked what you can achieve in a city where regeneration is posed in exactly the right way and in the right location. And the position of Brindley Place, even today, remains almost unique, being next to Symphony Hall, the ICC, and the Birmingham Arena. And all those things are brought together with Brindley Place at the centre of that, creating the amenities, the office space, the 24/7 environment that's needed. But what we have found, as regeneration has escalated over those last years, is the need for linkages to be really strong. And this isn't about being connected by car. This is being connected in a holistic, sustainable way. And those need to be into, out and through development, not just by car, but by foot, cycleways, public transport, tram systems, and strategic rail links that bring enough people into a city centre and then disperse them within the city centre in an easy way. And the key to future growth of any city in the future is going to be its ability to do that. And we can look at examples as we go through this morning, talking about which other examples have been developed, not just in Birmingham, because Friargate in Coventry has some similar attributes, particularly being located so close to Coventry rail station. But the City Council has been responsible for bringing some developments forward, and Nathan's been involved in some great developments in Birmingham, both in the past and in the future, that are going to help with this community aspect.
That, I think, Nathan, was probably a link into some of your work there. I was going to say, you may be aware that in an interview with EG earlier in the year, Andy Street highlighted your Port Loop development as an example of what residential projects could aspire to in terms of design. I wonder if you could take us through a little of the thinking behind that project, maybe point to some of the other work you're doing that touches on some of the trends that Carl was talking about there.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I'm very flattered that people are saying such nice things about Port Loop. I think I'm not going to sort of sit here and say it's all urban splash. I mean, it's a partnership, very, very much partnership scheme, really. So, and it's actually, the partnership's really interesting. We've got Place for People, biggest housing association in the country, but very interested in place and design. So they add a lot to the partnership. And then we've got Birmingham City Council and Canals and Rivers Trust. And again, they both, in their own ways, offer loads to the partnership. So it's actually 4 really, really interesting partners, really, that are delivering this scheme. So that's the first thing. And we sort of approached it very differently. The first thing we did actually was we wrote a manifesto, and the manifesto just sort of set out a series of sort of aspirations, really, and a series of commitments, if you like, as to what we wanted this place to be. So we started, we talked about the green agenda, we talked about new parks, we talked about green streets, not mean streets, and how we can encourage community, and sort of how that sort of played out, really. And we're now on our 3rd phase already. And the first thing we did was we spent £1 million on a new park, which was very much about the integrating the local community. And it's not just words. This is a genuine thing. Is that I believe that we need to incorporate the Ladywood community and to feel they must feel part of this scheme, because it is a on the whole a relatively deprived community, and this is actually something really new and great, we hope, and we very much need them to be part of it. So we built a new park, spent £1 million on that, and we had an event last year where we encouraged, we had over 1,000 local people come to the park. We had lots of games and integration and stuff, which was great. And then in terms of the houses, we've built, we're on our, I said, third phase now. Some of them are modular, some of them are more traditional, mix of architectural styles. And what we've done, what was most interesting, I suppose, is in those houses, yes, inside they're nicely designed and externally we like them, not to everyone's taste, like always. But in the communal gardens, what we've done is we've actually, rather than just give each people a sort of postage stamp garden, we've actually given people a defensible 3 or 4 metre space, but then encouraged a community garden in each of the 40 blocks of houses. And we sort of thought about that, and it's quite a difficult one to do, but we thought that actually encouraging people to go out and talk to their neighbours and their kids can play out safely are all things that we should be encouraging really as developers, rather than taking the easy route of the postage stamp type gardens. So it's a test bed, it's new, it's different. Hopefully it'll be a success. We're confident that we can deliver that original manifesto. Really, but we're only at the start of it.
Of course. Becky, how do some of the issues that we're talking about reflect in the work of you and colleagues at the council?
So I think the 2 examples that have been talked about of Brindley Place and Portloop are really very relevant here. They're obviously very close to each other as well, and the big connection is the canals. And the canals in Birmingham do a lot of what Carl initially mentioned in terms of connecting places. And as you say, it's not about vehicle connections, it's about connecting people and how people move around. And actually the canal corridor from Brindley Place, Portloop, the recently consented Soho Loop scheme, you've then got City Hospital, which is relocating to the new Midland Metropolitan Hospital site. So there's a site there partly in Homes England ownership, partly owned by the hospital, which offers potential for significant number of new homes as well. And there's sites moving further out into Sandwell. So there's a whole canal corridor there that offers us something slightly different than perhaps the traditional approach of using roads as the main point of connectivity. There's some real strong walking and cycling routes, and maybe water taxis, things like that as well, which just provide a slightly different offer. So I think that's a really interesting point. The point that Nathan made about the trying something different house types, different approaches to gardens and shared spaces. I think Portloop is well located for doing that. It's on the edge of the city centre. It's perhaps it perhaps opens it up to a market that are more interested in a more flexible approach to and maybe not so wedded to the traditional sort of house and garden and private spaces, perhaps moving out of the city centre. So I think that's really interesting. What will be interesting moving forward is how we can replicate that success in different ways in different places. So finding the right tools or the right approaches in different places. So where you've got the potential for the highest densities around key transport nodes, for example, stations, metro stops, things like that, you can take that kind of approach. But perhaps when you get into more suburban areas, what are some of the things that we can do in bringing forward new development? And I'm thinking about places like the Langley Sustainable Urban Extension. The approach taken there is likely to be quite different, but can still be innovative and can still offer us something new.
That makes sense. I wanted to jump back to an interesting point that Nathan made there about engagement with communities as these projects are developed. I mean, how can the industry ensure that it's bringing in more diverse voices that are reflecting newer generations to bear on work and projects? I mean, in designing developments for the future, how do we make sure that those newer communities are that they feel brought into the bigger picture, as it were, when designs and developments are ongoing? Nathan, I wonder how you've achieved that with.
It's a really easy answer. Well, not an easy answer, but we always do the same thing, I suppose. Every time we look at we look at a new area and look at a new site, and that's meet people and find out what's going on and find out what's special about that area. And every single area we've worked in has always had something unique, something interesting, something special about it. So, for instance, in Ladywood, we're working with a company, they were called Impact Hub, they're now called Civic Square, which are effectively a community-based organisation. They've actually taken our boat, which was originally meant to be our marketing suite, but they've now taken our boat as their office, and they're going to hopefully, subject to funding, set up a huge 30,000 square foot community facility within the what we call the Tube Works on site. So it's about engaging genuinely with the local community and really sort of seeing what's special and seeing how that can be integrated into schemes, because new modular, very unapologetically modern houses might look quite foreign to in some of these areas, understandably, and quite alienating, I suppose. So we've really genuinely sort of reached out. We've not got it perfect. We've probably missed people off the list. I'm sure there are lessons that we can learn, but we try, and we've got an open door, and we just like talking to everybody, really.
Okay. I'm going to jump to, we've got some questions on Slido here. Let me just throw one out to you. This is from Peter Small, who says, in the first session, our earlier panel today, it was suggested that communities will help to rebuild the city after coronavirus. Might reparishing the city help so that communities have a structure within which to build? Who'd like to offer some thoughts on that?
It's quite. I think there are lots of community structures, and I'm not necessarily sure that setting up formal community structures that are imposed by someone else is necessarily a positive way forward. Just to give an example, there are lots of structures that the council operates, our ward committees and ward forums, which are attended on fairly well in some places, less well in other places. And in my experience, there are then the informal or the community groups that are operated locally and the local networks, which are much better able to reach out to people. Now, it might be that a parish approach could do that, but I think my concern would be that it's got to be a grassroots approach, not an approach imposed on people.
Okay.
I'd agree with that. What you don't want to do is create another hierarchy and something that's set in stone. This, in my view, as we emerge from the current crisis, is to harness all of the good that we've seen during this period of time. The building up of a great community spirit, selfless volunteering, and actions taken in need have to be actions that we continue to be defined by in the future. We need to make sure that our communities are built up and pushed back together. Nathan's talked about the way that you can do that through development by getting rid of personal space and creating much more common amenity areas where people can meet, so that you don't just leave your own house in the morning in your car and you don't see your neighbours, but that you walk your streets as we're doing now, that you go and walk to work and you pass people as you do and you meet them, you talk to them. You're building up this sense of belonging. That's the really important part. And I don't think a hierarchical approach to that would do us any good.
No, I think there's lots of things that can be done to support grassroots community groups and to help them be appropriately representative and to achieve their aims. But completely agree with Carl that imposing structures on people is not necessarily a successful way of doing it. And I think you would end up with quite a mixed level of success, with some areas engaging far better than others, which I think could actually increase levels of sort of, I don't think it would bring a level playing field. I think
Okay.
that's where I'm trying to get to. Yeah.
Okay. Another interesting question we've had submitted very much about our working through the COVID-19 pandemic. I think this is from Richard Osborne at Excello Law, who asks, do the panel see any impact on or changes in urban design for communities that will arise directly out of our current situation?
It's a bit early.
Nathan, you've thrown yourself in there.
Sorry, it's a bit early for that. I know if it's the Richard, I think it is. It's a bit early for that one, but I mean, I think there's going to be all sorts of outcomes of this. We're only just sort of dipping our toe into what the what the sort of lockdown means. But yeah, I echo what Carl says. Really, is that there is going to be some real fundamental changes about perhaps how people go to work, what people do with work, and how we genuinely start thinking about community engagement more in a more genuine way. Because a lot of people, in this industry, and I'm sure we've been guilty of it in the past, do use words and don't always back it up with actions, really. And I think if we've got to be genuine. We talk about community and engagement, we've got to be genuine about it. We've got to be real, and we've got to talk to the real people. And I think if that's a positive that comes out of it, great.
I'd absolutely agree. I think there's Birmingham's already being really ambitious about reallocation of road space, about density around key transport nodes, with the approach with the clean air zone. There's already a lot of ambition here, and I think one of the things that the last few weeks has demonstrated, certainly for me, is that we don't all need to be driving our cars around all the time. We can shop locally, and I think this has had a massive impact on high streets. It's had a massive impact on all businesses, but small businesses on high streets who are reliant on local people and who have had to close, we all need to get back out there and support them. So the way we work, the way we live our day-to-day lives, and how we use our local areas. I'm seeing a lot of people going out for walks on a daily basis and enjoying our green spaces. And some of those people probably haven't previously made use of those green spaces. Understanding how we can integrate both within established communities. So I live in Cottridge. I've got parks locally I can walk to. But if we're creating new development, how do we link that to established spaces? And also, how do we create new spaces and places that people can use? How do we, I'm thinking Port Loop, for example, the nearest local shopping facilities are on Dudley Road. What do we do to support that, to make sure that actually local people are supporting local businesses? And how do we do that in design terms? How do we do that by creating physical connections? And how do we make it easy and safe for people to move around their neighbourhoods and use their local businesses? So I think it's opening people's eyes to a lot of things that they perhaps haven't needed to think about before, and perhaps designers have and planners and perhaps this industry has perhaps had a view on those things, but hasn't really had the wider support or backing for it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this is a time for change.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I have a question here on Slido. It's something that I can tick off my own list of questions, but it's been phrased in a much better way than I would have. So I'm going to use the words here instead. How do we ensure that sustainability remains a central priority in development as the economy recovers over the coming months, possibly even years? Nathan, maybe you could kick us off here.
Yeah, a great question. The last recession in 2000, sustainability, it certainly in my career, started really gathering momentum in 2005, 2006, 2007. And then almost, probably unfair to completely use this across the whole industry, but almost sort of fell away during the recession. Talk of it, it just seemed to sort of fall down people's priorities, and maybe rightly. But I'm pleased to see in the last year or so, I mean, last year in particular, I think it was a sort of year of sort of talk, if you like, but a year of a call to action, I think. And then this year there seems to be genuine changes to the way people are thinking and acting. The simple answer is legislation, I'm afraid. And it's quite unusual for me to say that as a sort of developer, really, but I believe in it. I think it's the only way, because the problem is that if you don't legislate, the dare I say it, the chancers or the people that are working on very low margins just aren't going to do it. I've been a firm believer. I mean, it's quite interesting. You look around, there's a lot of contradictions as well around the country. The government have got a 2050 zero carbon target. Manchester's got a 2038. Birmingham's got a 2030. There are all sorts of kind of varying different policies and things. And I still don't think we as an industry are being clear on what zero carbon means. As well, because are we talking about in build, or are we talking about in use, or are we talking about businesses themselves? And the reality of it is, we need to think, our business anyway, we need to think about all three of those things. Yeah. So yeah, it's a big thing for us as a business. We're trying to do some really interesting things, which I can talk about later if you like. But we've all got to come together. But I do see it as coming central and local government actually really coming down hard. On us as developers to make sure that we, achieve the targets.
Becky, what's the perspective from the council on this topic?
Well, I'm really glad that Nathan spoke first on that and made the point about legislation, because I didn't want to be the sort of public sector planner bringing in more red tape. But I actually think Nathan's absolutely right. If we want people to do things, and if we want everyone to be committed to doing those things, whether it be about the zero carbon in build, zero carbon in end use, whatever it is we're asking people to do, we can't say, oh, well, in Birmingham we have to do it, but in Sandwell we don't, because you're going to end up with people not building in Birmingham and going across the border to Sandwell. You're not going to get a comprehensive approach, and it needs to be to meet the targets that we're seeking. If it's done on an ad hoc basis, it needs legislation. I think that's absolutely clear. I think the other thing that I would say that's quite interesting recently is around sustainability as one thing, but actually resilient communities. So it's not just about building a sustainable building, it's about the lifetime of that building, it's about decarbonisation of heat, it's about well-being, it's about green spaces, it's about mitigating flood risk, it's all of those things. So I suppose they are all about sustainability, but we've started to use the word resilience a lot more. And I think it's about creating resilient communities, not a sustainable building, because a sustainable building is just a physical thing. Creating a community or a space or an area that is a resilient place is kind of the direction we should be going in. But as Nathan says, in order to achieve that, you need clear rules around how that should be done.
I think it's just about in it. I think it's the level playing field, isn't it? If you're bidding for a piece of land and you're going to build a highly sustainable, highly green building, which may cost 10% more than a low grade equivalent, if you like. Clearly the lower build costs are going to offer a higher land value, and that the landowner is going to sell that land to that person. Now, if everyone's playing on the same, the playing field, and everyone has to achieve the same level of carbon and sustainability outputs, then it brings that thing closer together. Now, there'll probably be people screaming down their laptops saying that's going to affect my land value, but and it will, and it'll affect perhaps it will affect margins as well. But I think it is such a big issue. It's not something we can play about with, and it's an issue. Hopefully coronavirus will be gone away in 3 months, but what's absolutely sure is the climate's here forever, and we've got to genuinely protect it and do the right thing.
Absolutely.
We have to be brave. We have to say, actually, at this point, if we don't do something now, the moment's gone. We've got to be brave, and we've got to make the difference.
Yeah.
Absolutely. An interesting comment here on Slido about partnerships. This says communities always evolve from providing the infrastructure where people want to live. I think we've touched on that. Mm-hmm. So long as the design is well thought out, the scheme will be successful, but a cohesive approach is required, and this is down to the developers as much as the planners. Will planners partner with developers more now? Do we see that coming together of the parties perhaps happening more easily, readily?
I mean, I think it'd be fair to say that planners and developers already work very closely together, certainly in my experience. And for example, with Urban Splash at Portloop, we have worked closely together. I think there's lots of opportunities for us to do more. And fully supportive of that. I don't know that the current situation makes that more or less likely, but it's certainly something that we should be doing and are doing, and will look to continue to do and increase the way we can work with developers where it's in the interest of everybody to do so.
I mean, just generally on planning. I mean, I'm not just saying this because Rebecca's here. We've mainly our experiences in Birmingham are actually very, very positive. We've always had a good relationship with Birmingham Council. However, as a general point, and we're operating all over the country, I've personally never known planning be more difficult than it is right now. And I think that's a number of things, really. Probably the main one is just lack of resource, really. I think that's a big issue. I think again is contradictory stuff from local policies, national policies, and the like. So we have, where we've been putting forward what we think is really, really good quality design. Sometimes we've come up against planning authorities that have said to us, "Oh, it doesn't look like a standard house builder box. We don't like the look of that. It looks different, and I don't want to go out my comfort zone." And that worries me a bit as an industry. It worries me a bit, and we've got to, I'm actually a qualified planner, and we've got to encourage, planning officers and local government to be brave and be bold, and also get behind, new designs that might not look the same as everything else. So it's a difficult, complex subject. And please see the government trying to simplify it, but it is. Many governments have said that over the last decade or so.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that simplifying things is necessarily the answer. It's resourcing and empowering people. As you say, resource is a massive issue. There's often discussions with developers that people would love to have, but actually, if you've also got 50 planning applications and you can't talk to all 50 of the developers at the same level of detail, if you've got a stack of pre-apps coming in, you've got to work through them and try and address each one. You can't do the level of detail that you might like to do. So resourcing will lead to better planning. Yes, legislation possibly simplifying things, but resourcing is the number one thing that will lead to better planning and a better ability for planners to work with developers.
Okay, got it. Now, I'm afraid we are almost out of time, and I fear that we have lost Carl from the call. But just to close, Becky, Nathan, I was going to ask you both a question that I ended our earlier panel with. When this time passes, when we move through this crisis, what's one opportunity that you would really love to see Birmingham grasp going forward?
I'd really like, this is a bit of a personal one, I suppose. I'd really like to see Birmingham grasp and expand its cycle network. I think walking and cycling in the city, there's loads of people enjoying walking and cycling around this city at the moment. And the main reason they can do it, not so many cars on the road. Really continuing to be a leader in active travel and public transport is, for me, sort of a real opportunity here. And I really hope that we can take the city's communities along with us on that journey, and that the current situation has helped people see the opportunities.
I think that would be great, wouldn't it? If there is a positive to take away from this, you're right. Nathan, some thoughts from you, maybe?
Yeah, it sounds a little bit sort of micro level, this, but I think it's canal network. And the reason I say that is because I've spent a lot of time on it because of Portloop. But it's actually, even if you only get 750 metres outside the city centre from Brindley Place, one side of the canal turns into mud quite quickly. And that's terrible, really, because there's a lot of people running and jogging and also and biking and all sorts.
Yeah.
So I think investing in that, and if you go trying to get me bearings right, if you go south or east of the city centre, you can go around the canal network. There might be north actually, but you can go around Spaghetti Junction, and it is the most amazing experience just walking under canals, some of which are cantilevers, some of which go under the M6, some of which go under the M40. It's actually an incredible experience, and so it has got loads of interesting infrastructure, Birmingham, but no one ever, well, I say no one ever, not many people use it, and I think it's a real asset that it needs to exploit much more in terms of how people connect with it.
Can I just add in? Because, sorry, I did drop out the call, but I'm back now, if you can hear me.
Good to have you back.
The canal network, it can't be underestimated how important that is to Birmingham. And it's transformed the west side of Birmingham. It's transformed those links to Portloop, and will continue to do so to the redevelopment of East Birmingham Hospital. But more importantly, what the city does need to do, and we all need to do as an industry, is make sure that as the Curzon master plan starts to evolve, the links underneath the rail network along Curzon are really opened up, because at the moment that is one of the dreariest parts of the canal. And the canal towpaths are brilliant. They have, where CRT have maintained them and improved them properly, provide a great way of integrating walking through the city, walking from the west side into the city. But on the east side of the city, from east side down to Digbeth, there's huge strides that need to be made to make those connections really work well if we're going to make the most of HS2 and the capacity in terms of residential development that Digbeth can give the city.
That's excellent. Well, I think we're almost out of time now for today, but thank you to my guests for joining us on this discussion. Thank you as well, of course, to our guests from the earlier panel and all of our partners for their support on today's virtual event. And thank you at home as well for tuning in. I hope you found it entertaining and informative. And I hope you all stay well and that you and your loved ones are happy and healthy in these challenging times. Thank you for watching, and take care.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.